This is our final chance to protect ourselves from the catastrophic ending to a 103-year-old era. It's also our greatest opportunity to be the true heirs to the new system that will soon replace the dying US dollar. There's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity brewing under the surface. The greatest wealth transfer of all times is upon us, as treasury bill holders and everyday savers will lose fortunes while the US dollar takes the last breath before returning to ashes, like all fiat currencies throughout history. You see, assets are divided into four main categories. Stocks, real estate, and the like generate steady cash flow. Thus, they derive their market value from the income they produce. Commodities derive value from the variety of products that they can be turned into according to human needs. Treasury bills, their value comes from the ability of the US government to tax the population and pay the bondholders. Cash derives its value by law. We are obligated to accept it, but intrinsically, all national paper notes are essentially worthless. Therefore, throughout history, they have always been backed by hard assets. Today, this is not the case. The imminent danger with treasury bills lies in the fact that the US government issued a ridiculous amount of bonds for the past 45 years to finance the budget that can never be repaid by taxes. A bond that can't be repaid is junk. The national debt is roughly $20 trillion today, and including future obligations to retirees, it is an insane $103 trillion. This is unsustainable and could lead to a catastrophic war, as foreign governments own a huge portion of the bonds. The grave danger that lurks for cash savers is even greater. Going back to 1913, the Federal Reserve Act granted the lawful right to issue dollars to the Fed. From there on, it was the responsibility of the Fed to maintain a balanced currency supply relative to gold, so that destructive boom and bust cycles wouldn't occur, and the purchasing power of the dollar would remain intact. This has been the most colossal failure in banking history. The US dollar has lost more than 95% of its value, and it is now on its deathbed. The Fed has devastated savers and robbed us all by failing to manage the currency supply. By 1965, nations were becoming concerned the US was rigging the books. Dollars were being created out of thin air, so nations demanded that this bluff come to an end. Increasing political pressure to expose the corrupted bankers was relentless. In 1971, Nixon had the chance to come clean about the granddaddy of all frauds, but instead chose the easy way out and cut the connection between the dollar and gold.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
That was the final nail in the dollar coffin. But you can't cheat gold for long. Since all currencies were tied to dollars since 1944, Nixon's action made sure all currencies were now funny money and nothing more. Gold and silver then did what they do best, accounted for all the inflated currency in circulation since 1913. Gold went from $35 to more than $800 per ounce in a single decade, while silver went from $1.63 to nearly $50 per ounce, a 3,000% return. In 2008, to avoid total collapse, the US government put the dollar on life support. If the Federal Reserve System goes down, it takes the entire world with it. When governments default, it leads to wars, and no greater war could erupt than if the Chinese, Japanese, Russians, and Europeans who own the bonds to the federal debt realize the US cannot possibly meet their obligations. So, the Treasury collaborated with the Fed on their largest combinations of scams ever, the bailouts, the QE programs, and negative interest rates. But the most desperate action is yet to come. In order to keep the dollar alive, the equivalent of electric shocks will be given to save the dollar. Get ready for helicopter money. This is our worst nightmare if it happens, and has the potential to lead to hyperinflation. There's a fifth type of asset though. It is the ultimate form of money that has fulfilled its responsibility to maintain purchasing power for savers since the dawn of civilization without fail. It is a store of value and therefore the chosen form of cash for the astute investor. In the last few months, the holders of paper cash, sensing that the end of the dollar era is coming, are flocking to the golden shelter. The reason to own physical precious metals today is so that your savings won't be wiped out any longer. It is simply liquid cash money that always works. When people lose confidence in fiat currency, it goes back to its intrinsic value of zero faster than you can imagine. There's one big secret that separates precious metals from all other assets on the planet and makes them at very specific time frames, as close to a sure thing as it comes. Gold and silver do not have regular bull and bear markets. Instead, the public, throughout human history, senses that the central banks and governments fail at managing the credit system and begin to convert their cash savings into precious metals, and an accounting period begins. You see, accounting periods occur intuitively as the metals are repricing themselves to cover the currency supply when facts gather and creditors fear debtors are unlikely to honor obligations. China, for instance, is not wasting time. They are preparing for the dollar's funeral by accumulating massive amounts of gold to become the dominant player in the global economy. You better be on the right side of this trade when it happens. This accounting period is underway now, and if gold were to account for the 2016 dollar currency supply, it would trade for over $10,000 per ounce in no time. Before the dollar takes its last breath, these desperate CPR attempts are igniting a chance to make parabolic gains, as things are just warming up. This is the motherlode. The new metallionaires will be created during these next few years, as the mining shares will make their epic ascent to the center stage. Wealth Research Group has done its homework. We have researched 758 companies and narrowed it down to less than 10 with the potential for mind-boggling returns. In the next 60 days, institutional investors will begin to pile in as mining shares will begin reporting third quarter earnings, and they will be stellar. So we have a very short window of opportunity to position ourselves before then. In order to exploit this one-of-a-kind situation, Wealth Research Group has created a special report on how to set up your steroid stocks portfolio intelligently and protect everything you have worked for your entire life. It highlights the specific flaws in the system and how to capitalize on the dollar's last breaths. It is a roadmap to become an astute resource investor. Download Metallionaires, outsmarting the dollar banksters now. That's wealthresearchgroup.com/dead dollar. It is time for these banksters to feel the wrath.